US aid as well as other donors had cushioned the citizens from the crises caused by economic instability in the country. Joining us to unpack this afternoon is Agnes Nyirongo, an Economic Governance Officer at Malawi Center for Social Concern. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you so much.
So perhaps, Agnes, let's start here. The rising debt levels, what impact do they have on service delivery in the country as well as on the citizens themselves?
All right. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Okay, the public debt crisis has reached unsustainable levels in Malawi. That is, we are talking about 16.9 trillion, which is accounting for about 86% of its gross domestic product. And this crisis is not just a matter of statistics, but it is a lived reality for millions of Malawians struggling to afford, for example, food, fuel, healthcare, education, and even on some other things that they can sustain their life every day. So, if we are trying to understand the debt now in Malawi, we can break it down into two, the domestic debt, which is almost 8.7 trillion, and external debt, which is 7.39, 39 trillion. So this increase, we got into this situation because of it has increased to this level because of high budget deficits. Even the current budget deficit for 2025, we have seen how much the deficit for the debt that they are supposed to borrow money in order to sustain the budget for this year. And you can also look at the currency depreciation, declining value, in which has also caused this situation in Malawi, and even failure for the government to collect enough revenues. So this has also, we can also consider other factors like the essential climate and climate shocks and crops that have happened. We are talking of the cyclone Fred and the COVID-19, which has also affected the debt to increase for Malawi in order to provide for the social services. So this has brought a great impact to the lives of Malawians. We are talking of the inflation, which has just happened recently in January. That's 28%, 28.5% this year, January 2025. This has caused a lot of challenges for most of Malawians because it has eroded their purchasing power, and people, they cannot manage to buy basic goods. So we are talking of maize flour, sugar, cooking oil, which the prices have gone out of control. And these are the basic things that people we look at, how are they? If they are accessing the basic goods, it means their life is at least much better. But if people are failing to access the basic goods, so it's also a challenge for them.
And I think that, Agnes, it just really shows how much of an impact this has on people's day-to-day lives. Oftentimes we talk about these huge figures, external debt, internal debt, we talk about trillions, but as you are explaining, the purchasing power is eroded. People cannot even afford, to acquire the basics for themselves. Now, in an effort to try and change the dynamics that you're highlighting now, last year, the finance minister, Banda, indicated that government had reached certain agreements with official bilateral creditors, and also he said that they're negotiating with commercial creditors to restructure the debt. And this obviously to ease the foreign exchange and provide some fiscal space. What have been the outcomes of these talks?
Recently, I cannot comment much on that because, I think there are some negotiations, but we have never come, we are not yet there, to the point where I wanted for us to be debt forgiven and the credit facility. So most of these things, the government of Malawi, maybe they can also consider other things, not only concentrating on the debt restructuring talks only, but we can also consider things like public finance management reforms and currency devaluation and liberalization, which they can also help them in order to stabilize their economy right now. Because if we only concentrate on the debt restructuring, it means there are other things that we cannot. Maybe if the talks fail to come to the conclusion that we want, for us or to be forgiven for the on the debt, But there are also other things that the government should take in control, like in power, for them in order to achieve whatever they want to achieve.
So a more diversified approach is what you are proposing there, Agnes. Thank you very much for your insight and for that
Yes.
update today. That's Agnes Nirongo, an Economic Governance Officer at Malawi Center for Social Cohesion. You'll remember that there was an issue of a shortex as far as Forex is concerned in Malawi that resulted in air flights being suspended to the country. They couldn't even procure any fuel. Has that been addressed? Perhaps also one of the issues that Agnes there, would have been able to speak to us on. It's gone 26 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Back with more of your continent's leading business developments in just a moment.
Big news from Channel Africa. Now you can listen and watch your favorite shows on Channel Africa. Channel Africa is streaming live on the internet on all our social media pages at Channel Africa 1 from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m. Central African Time. Download the SABC Plus app or visit our website www.channelafrica.co.za and stream us live on all our social media pages at Channel Africa 1. Channel Africa now streaming for your eyes and ears only. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
It is 27 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time. The 12th Annual Africa Sugar Conference, which is Africa's premier sugar and ethanol industry event, is currently taking place in Nairobi, Kenya. Industry leaders have gathered to discuss global market trends, price forecasts, and Africa's role in the global sugar trade. They've also explored how intra-African trade agreements are reshaping opportunities for growth in the sector. Meanwhile, Mike Ogg, the regional head of Bonsucro, says responsible practices among African sugar producers are vital in transforming the sector towards sustainability and climate resilience. He joins us now on the line. Good afternoon. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Hi there. How are you doing?
Awesome. Great to have you with us. So you are calling for sustainable practices in sugarcane production, in processing, as well as trade. Why is this important for the sugar industry?
I think it's been an interesting couple of days here at the conference. I think sustainability is not only the sugar industry's responsibility, but really everyone's responsibility. I think we're living in a world now with limited resources, growing populations, and we need to make sure that we actually produce more with less. I think in the past, maybe people have been worried about the term sustainability, and they've seen that sustainability equals cost. But as we've been discussing the last couple of days, actually doing the right thing creates a more viable business, and that's really where the sugar industry needs to go. I think also what we've been discussing the last couple of days is that buyers and the consumers are demanding visibility around sustainability and are demanding sustainability. So actually the conclusion really is that sustainability is good for business.
Yesterday at the conference, you had a session where you presented the Bonsucro Climate Toolkit, and this is essentially to measure, to mitigate, as well as manage climate action, in African sugarcane production. Could you tell us about this toolkit and how African countries can adopt it in their respective sugar industries?
Sure. So I think one of the themes that has dominated the conference as well is the impact of climate, not only on the industry, but on communities and the supply chain that relies on the industry. So Bonsucro is very aware of this, and Bonsucro is not only a certification body, we also a body that convenes the sector around these difficult challenges. And we've developed a number of tools. So briefly, we have a tool, a GHG, a greenhouse gas calculator, which allows operators to measure their greenhouse gas emissions, which is really what I was trying to get across yesterday is if you can't measure, you can't manage. So we have a measuring tool. And then we have a tool which operators can use to determine the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions to align them with the Paris Accord and the aim to ensure that global warming doesn't rise above 1.5%. This tool is aligned with the Science Based Target Initiative and really gives operators an indication of how much they need to reduce by. And then finally, we are in the process of developing a climate vulnerability and resilience building tool, which will really allow operators to look at their operations with a climate lens and to put in place a set of resilience building activities and a funding plan for those activities, which, if done right, should be allow them to access green climate funding and make them more resilient, which is really important in Africa, because often we in Africa are not the causes of the climate change, but often suffer the largest consequences.
We certainly do. Well, thank you so much for the update coming out of the 12th Annual Africa Sugar Conference. Obviously, you hear issues of sustainability and just environmental friendliness and compliance very much central to this annual gathering. We thank you for your time this afternoon, Mike.
Pleasure.
Thank you. That's Mike Ogg. He's regional head of Bonsukro. He takes us to exactly 32 minutes after 4 p.m. Let's head over to the markets desk, where Chanduko Ligege is standing by with your market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Thami. A very good afternoon. $1 is trading at 18.93 in South Africa. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 76. Namibia, 18 Namibian dollars 93. The Zambian kwacha, 28 kwacha 28 to the US dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 85. Ethiopia, 131 birr 48. Uganda, 3,000 shillings 647. Tanzania, 2,000 shillings 681. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 603. In Egypt, the dollar is at 50 Egyptian pound 90. Tunisia, 2 dinar 99. Algeria, 131 dinar 95. In Morocco, the dollar will cost you 9 dirham 22. In Angola, the dollar is at 912 kwanza 60, while the Congolese franc is at 2,850 to the US dollar. Looking at commodities, gold is at $3,298, platinum at $965 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $65.45 a barrel. And that is all from me, Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And you heard that whistle, you know what it means. It's time to get onto the sporting field with Mosibudi Makura.
All right, thank you so much, Thami, for that. We'll start with this story. So there's been a lot of interest regarding the salary figure of Kenya's men's national football team. Head coach Benny McCarthy, who was just last month confirmed the coach of the Harambee Stars by the Football Federation of Kenya. So it has been reported now that the former Manchester United strikers coach is earning around about $62,000 per month. Meanwhile, the Football Kenya Federation has set the record straight, dismissing this reported figure, while also dismissing this salary. FKF did not disclose the exact amount that the coach is earning, of course, leaving the door open for speculation. Let's speak now to Eric Njeru, who is a sports journalist from the Radio Africa group out in Nairobi, Kenya. He's going to help us get to the figure. What exactly is Coach Benny McCarthy earning as the Harambee Stars head coach? Eric, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. I guess there has been just a lot of interest regarding Benny McCarthy's salary as the head coach of Harambee Stars. What can you tell us about the figure that he's earning every month?
Well, right now, no one really knows the official figure, but that is what has been reported. That is, like you said, slightly over $61,000, which is like 8 million shillings in Kenya. It's been reported by a couple of publications in Kenya and a number of journalists here in Kenya. And obviously, considering that this guy came from Manchester United in the UK to Kenya, it could be somewhere near there because it's not easy to get him to come and sign for a local African team. So you have to pay him well, you know. So I'm not surprised with that kind of a figure. So I do think he could be getting paid that amount of money. And it's not FKF that is paying, so it's the government. So I mean, he could be earning that money because it's been reported like that by some official publications. Yeah,
to also give you sort of perspective as well, he was earning about £40,000 a week as a strikers coach at Man United. That translated to about $212,000 a month. So he's definitely earning big money. It also makes him one of the most paid coaches on the African continent if this figure of $62,000 is indeed correct. You did say earlier that the salary has been paid by the government of Kenya as opposed to the Football Federation of Kenya. Why is that?
Well, there's always some agreement between the federation and the government for the government to help the federation to offset some costs, because the FKF is not making so much money, so they asked the government to help in offsetting that kind of payment. Even the past coach was here. I think there's an agreement from the last couple of federations, so the government helps the Football Federation only to pay for this, and so the government sends money to the federation, then the federation now pays their coach. So it's just a plan. It's not an official thing. It's not an employee of the government. It's not paid by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. It's paid by the FKF, but it's the government that sends money. So it's an agreement between the two entities.
Then, Eric, what can you tell us about the FKF also being in debt at the moment? I remember a few weeks ago it was reported that they were in debt for about close to $3 million. That's a lot of debt, obviously, that the Federation is carrying at the moment. Would that also be the reason why at this current juncture they're unable to afford that $62,000 that is currently being reported by the media? I wonder.
Yeah, that could be the reason, because they've just come into the office, like I think the last couple of months. They were elected in December. This is like their 4th month right now in office, and they've said that they filed debts, like you've said. I mean, there was a press conference to say how much money they owe. There's so much money that is owed to legal fees. I mean, the FKF is always in court. So yes, I do agree that FKF has got a lot of debts because of how things have been running, because of COVID, and also we were suspended by FIFA in 2021. So we went into so many debts, and now we're trying to pay all these debts, and some of those debts are from paying some coaches who are fired not so well. So they went to court, they went to FIFA, and they won money, so they've been paid. And remember, that money doesn't come back, so you have to be in debt. So I do think they have a long way to go to pay those debts now, start now making profit, getting new sponsors. It's a long way for them.
Just a final one, we talk about Benny McCarthy, but he obviously has a technical team, so that salaries of the technical team is also paid by the government, right?
Yes, when they agreed that the government will pay the entire technical bench.
Yeah.
Even some Kenyan coaches who are part of it. I think we've got 1 or 2. So the entire package now comes from the government, and then the FKF now pays the coaches.
Eric, thank you so much for your time this afternoon on Channel Africa, just helping us dissect the figures, still unconfirmed, obviously, if Benny McCarthy is earning that $62,000. But of course, when you look at the figures that have been put out there, he's likely to earn that money. Obviously, it comes from having coached the likes of Man United, the strikers coach there. He was earning big bucks there. Obviously, he's coming to Kenya, not earning any small money. That's a wrap from the sports desk at this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibu Di Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Nous allons accueillir sur ces plateaux de Mix Vibration un artiste pas comme les autres. Il est exceptionnel. Il se classe résolument dans la trajectoire des artistes qui défendent le patrimoine du folklore africain, mais aussi de la rumba. Ici, Jérémy Tchani.
En tout cas, je vous dis merci à la Channel Africa, à tout le monde qui nous suit. Dans la vie, si tu veux aller loin, il faut comprendre les temps. Il y a ceux-là qui étaient dans leur temps, mais à cause d'une mauvaise conduite, à cause des gens qu'il accompagnait à cause de sa famille, à cause beaucoup de choses. Son temps passé.
Voilà, donc il faut toujours gérer le temps. Chaque chose a son temps, dit-on. Et la couronne ne dure pas éternellement, dit-on. Donc il faut toujours gérer le temps que Dieu vous a donné sur la terre. C'est le message que Jérémy Tchani nous amène aujourd'hui sur Mix Vibration à Channel Africa.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 4:41 Central African Time. We certainly ensure that you are kept abreast of all business developments. Doesn't matter whether it's mining or energy or sport. This is certainly your go-to place for all things business on the African continent. It is exactly 41 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time. Do continue engaging with us on the various social media platforms. You'll find us at Channel Africa 1 on X, Instagram and YouTube, and that's the numerical one, so it's numero uno as opposed to ONE. It's the numerical value 1. And on Facebook you'll find us at Channel Africa. If you have any stories that you'd like to share, all things business, all things finance, all things economy, do send us those story leads to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Let us know what's happening in your country. Let us know what's happening in your region. Looking forward to receiving those.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
We come back to South Africa now, where more than 20,000 workers at Transnet, which is South Africa's rail, port and pipeline company, could be downing tools. Now, this is after the United National Transport Union declared a deadlock in talks for the 2025-2026 financial year, rejecting Transnet's latest wage offer of 6%. The looming strike does pose a potential collapse to the country's economy and the logistics sector. The last strike by unions in the sector was estimated to have cost mining companies around $43 million a day. Joining us to unpack this is Atenkosi Blaiki, the United National Transport Union's spokesperson. A very good afternoon to you, Atenkosi. Thank you for joining us on Africa in Business.
A very good afternoon to you and a good afternoon to the listeners.
So, Atenkosi, we understand that SATAWU, which is the South African Transport and Allied Workers Union, that they, as a union, have in fact accepted the 6% wage offer that Transnet has put on the table. Why have you, as the United National Transport Union, said no, this is not good enough for us?
Well, that is correct. SATAWU did accept the final tabled offer presented by management, and that final offer was also a direct reflection of their opening demands. So you could see how they came to an agreement to sign that agreement. However, we should also remember that UNTU and SATAWU serve different constituencies. We have different members, and we have our own mandating process before wages commenced, whereby we go down to ground level at all operating divisions and we speak to our members and we get a mandate which we consolidate and then present to management. So the offer that was presented by management fell very, very far from the mandated demand that we received from our members. And also at the heart of the deadlock is also that management refused to sign a non-retrenchment clause. Now, if you remember that there are a lot of private sector participation reforms that are currently taking place at Transnet, and our fears is that that could lead to restructuring and job losses eventually. So we felt it is very important that there is a non-retrenchment clause to ensure job security as a responsible union. And another fact is that the offer that has been placed on the table by Transnet is basically just an extension of the wage agreement that we signed back in 2022. Now we're in 2025. A lot has changed economically. One could even say that there is a war on the working class because we are facing an economic crisis. VAT has gone up. The food basket is 6% more expensive than it was in 2022. And also electricity just went up by 12.4%. So you can see how we cannot sign an extension of a 2022 wage agreement.
So what is it that you're wanting? What is your ask or your demand?
Well, right now our demands are still 10% across the board, but I feel it's important that I put it on the table that when we were at the conciliation process, UNTU did move from 10%. However, when we moved, we knew that we'd have to go back to our members for a mandate. But we understood that we had to find a cordial solution to this impasse and averted industrial action, because we understand the impact that that could have on the economy, because we did lead the strike in 2022 and the economy lost about 1 billion rand a day. So with this context in mind, we did put certain proposal before management and moved from 10%. And we also suggested maybe having a longer wage term so that there can be labor stability while Transnet rebuilds. But despite all this, Transnet did not move from the final offer and they did not accept any changes. Basically, we could even call the conciliation proceedings as a waste of time because management did not approach it in good faith.
So you have, in effect, declared a deadlock. What's next? What are the next steps?
Okay, so because we signed the picketing rules before the salary wage negotiations, so what we needed next was that we needed the CCMA commissioner, which was facilitating that process on Monday, to issue us with the certificate of non-resolution. Now, the CCMA commissioner did send that certificate to us yesterday, meaning that we can then start planning for industrial action. But as I've said, that UNTU is a mandate-driven organization. So now we need to go back to our structures and find out from them if they are ready to go on a strike. However, we've had obviously some engagements before going to the conciliation, and members, especially at the ports, are ready to take to the streets. And at the heart of the deadlock is that non-retrenchment clause.
You know, Atengosi, you mentioned so many very real dynamics that are impacting and influencing your 10% demand, from the rise in Eskom tariffs to the rise in VAT. But is there a possibility that this could in fact backfire and lead to even more unemployment and job losses, considering the economic state?
Listen, it's going to be a protected strike, so you cannot be fired over a protected strike. However, when UNTU approach the conciliation, remember when you are at a negotiation table, one needs to move and the other party needs to also move so that you can meet each other halfway. So that's why it was very regrettable to UNTU that management did not even want to move an inch from the final offer. And unfortunately, we cannot disclose what those proposed figures we had at that conciliation process, because that would be contravening the CCMA rules. However, if we would be able to disclose the proposals that were on the table, one would find that they were very reasonable. And if Transnet's mandators and the business community were aware of how far we were able that we'd have to go back to our mandate seekers, which would be our members, they would be utterly dismayed. So only people who there is industrial action would be Transnet management, and that's the truth of the matter.
How long do you see this going on for? As in, do you have a time limit or a time frame in your mind, saying, okay, this far and no further, as far as deadlines that you have given yourself and timelines?
Well, as I said, right now we are busy with that balloting process. I can't disclose the time frames right now, but as soon as we're done with that process, we'll be able to know whether we're taking to the streets or we're looking at other alternatives.
Atengosi Plaki, thank you very much for giving us this update this afternoon in Africa in Business.
very much for having me.
Thank you. That's Atenkosi Blaki. She is the spokesperson for the United National Transport Union. They will be downing tools. It is a protected strike, she says, but they're not going to budge from that 10%, despite the fact that other unions have accepted the 6% that has been offered by Transnet. We'll continue keeping an eye on developments on that front for you. It's gone exactly 10 minutes to 5 p.m.
Africa in Song with Chanduko Ligege.
So the artist that I just played now went by the name A.B. Crystal. So A standing for Alfred, B for Benjamin. What's your take on people having two names? Is it because maybe you can't decide on a name?
I've heard people saying that they are named because of whatever that was happening around.
These are also seasonal. I'm sure now a baby born in the Eastern Cape is called Nomatarif.
You see now. Or it was a born baby when it was, what do you call these things we used to pay for men driving?
Noma Itol.
Noma Itol, listen.
Well, Noma Confident is leaving.
Africa in Song with Chanduko Ligege. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is exactly 9 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African time as we focus now on the latest as far as the markets are concerned. Joining us this afternoon is Simpiwe. Very good afternoon to you, Simpiwe.
Good afternoon.
Good to have you with us. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you for having me.
So, Simpiwe, it really has been a tumultuous time as far as markets are concerned, volatility, if we're looking at the UF tariffs and the impact that has had globally. But there also has been a lot of backtracking as far as Donald Trump is concerned. Could you talk to us about the latest developments and whether or not him saying, look, let's stay with the 10% bracket, except for the likes of China, of course, and then adding some exceptions as far as electronics are concerned, as far as tariffs are concerned. Has that somewhat calmed the markets?
No, certainly. We've seen quite a lot of positivity in the markets, a bit of a rebound. So all across the board, seeing local markets and global markets, recovering some of the losses. Particularly if you're looking at local markets, they've had quite a strong trading day even today. At some stage, reaching levels in excess of 90,000. So quite close to new record highs from a local market perspective. And really, as you correctly mentioned, a lot of it is being driven by quite a bit of backtracking. So it's a bit of a pause in terms of, some of the reciprocal tariffs or tariffs even against South Africa not being as aggressive as the 31%, but rather as it stands, we're at 10%. And then, of course, it's a bit more tit for tat between China and the US. But even there, what we did see coming out is, talks of potentially having some exemptions in that market as well. And if you think about, some of the major items that China does export to the US, quite a lot of them are tech oriented. So the likes of smartphones, semiconductors, etc., etc. So in effective terms, it means that quite a large chunk of their exports would actually be exempt from tariffs. But we're not out of the woods. It's still quite uncertain. And of course, we are monitoring developments as they unfold.
So let's focus a bit on the mining and manufacturing data for South Africa. That's out now. South Africa's industrial sector is facing pressure. This is on the back of declining mining production as well as manufacturing production. That's also been on the back foot. Could you give us a little bit of context and development around that, as well as the factors that have influenced and impacted this downturn?
For sure, and I think really we're still seeing an extended trend of declines in production, especially if you're looking at it on a year-on-year, so comparing particularly February compared to last year February. It's a bit of a mixed bag from a structural point of view. There's been some improvements as far as energy supply is concerned, and of course mining and manufacturing are quite energy-intensive sectors, so would have benefited from that. But quite a lot of challenges, particularly around around logistics, especially if you think about the mining sector, which is predominantly an export-driven sector. Quite a lot of issues around the ports, the railways, all of those, impacting movement of goods as far as mining is concerned, and as such, productivity levels as well. So those have really been some of the sticky points, and we're seeing when you're looking at mining, it's broad-based declines on a year-on-year basis across PGMs, gold, and some of the industrial metals as well. And then when you're looking at manufacturing, so partly it is due to supply, but what we're also seeing is some demand factors also at play. Vehicle sales being one of those, vehicle goods being one of those that are in decline from a year-on-year perspective, and that really speaks to sort of a bit of an environment where consumers are not necessarily purchasing your more durable, your more higher investment items.
So downturn for the likes of, those in mining and manufacturing production. But look, the likes of Clicks, they're having a good day.
No, certainly. So fairly decent and robust results in terms of, single-digit revenue growth, really being driven by some market share gains, particularly in the health and beauty against their competitors, and of course their main competitors being the likes of Dis-Chem. Earnings per share growing by double digits, and management still guiding for potentially double-digit growth even in the upcoming fiscal years. But they have highlighted risks, particularly around the VAT increase and how that can then affect, pricing and potentially margins, should they struggle to pass on those costs to consumers. And then, of course, quite a lot of global uncertainties as well. Although, of course, from a Clicks perspective, they are predominantly oriented and operate in SA, and their market is predominantly South Africa. But of course, there could be, indirect and second round effects, especially from an input cost perspective for any, input costs that derive from other markets.
And perhaps if you could take us through some of the commodity price movements.
Yeah, so from a commodity perspective, gold really being the standout commodity performer lately. Year to date is really doing quite strongly. And we're seeing it in excess of $3,000 an ounce, currently trading around 3,300. Quite a lot of that has to do with, gold being viewed as a safe haven asset, and with all the uncertainty, especially the uncertainty being focused on the US, which is predominantly also seen as a safe haven. I mean, concerns around possibly a recession does mean that asset allocators would then want to diversify away from the US, and gold has been getting a lot of benefit from that perspective, but quite a lot of other benefits from Reserve Bank buying up gold reserves as opposed to dollars reserves in recent years. So seeing that being the standout performer, platinum still moving fairly sideways along with palladium. So really the standout commodity at the moment is gold.
Thank you so much for today's wrap. We greatly appreciate it, Simphiwe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully we'll be chatting to Simphiwe on the regular as he takes us through the market movements. He is Simphiwe Letlojane. He is Head of Investment Strategy at Absa Investments. He takes us to 2 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African time. Thank you to our team on Africa in Business, to Mabo Muloka, our producer. On technical, we've got Nanda Koza, and a social media wizkid, that's Nsako Mashaba. From myself, Thami Ngubeni, and the team, you have yourself a splendid evening further as we take you through to the French desk. Joël standing by with Vue d'Afrique. It's exactly 2 minutes to 5 p.m.